You know that moment when life pushes you to a limit and you decide to push back? Well, that's how it all started. With a push, metaphorical and literal, from my mother-in-law. My name is Luna. And this story? Well, this story is about the day I was thrown out of the house, but that turned out to be my big turning point. Because my mother-in-law thought she was going to knock me down. But she just gave me the push I needed to get back up again. It all started on a random afternoon, one of those when the weather seems to conspire with the tension in the air. Vitor, my husband, and I lived in the house he inherited from his father. A spacious, comfortable house, but with one detail, the constant presence of Mrs. Legia, my mother-in-law. And when I say constant, I really mean constant. She gave orders, gave opinions, made decisions. The house might have belonged to Vitor, but she was the one who ruled there. For a while, I tried to let it go. We always try, right? She believes that with patience and dialogue, things get better. But with Mrs. Legia, patience was only seen as weakness. And when she realized that she could invade every space in my life, she didn't think twice. Until one day, out of the blue, she dropped the bombshell. Luna, I think it's better for you and Victor to think about moving. Just like that, with all the coldness of someone saying good morning. No beating around the bush. No conversation. No respect. The argument? That George, her favorite son, and his wife were going to move home. At that moment, I swallowed hard. I looked at Victor, expecting a reaction, a calm down, Mom, this house is mine too. But nothing. He was speechless. Maybe surprised. Maybe without courage. Maybe he was tired. All I know is that in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, decision. She wanted us to leave? Then we were going to leave. But not in the way she imagined. Not with tears, or requests, or drama. If Mrs. Legia wanted theater, she was going to have a show. The next day, I started organizing everything. I called the moving company and started packing every corner of the house. No crying. Just focus. Victor hesitated at first, but when he realized my determination, he got into the swing of things. We worked in silence, with a complicity we hadn't felt in a long time. I think that deep down, he couldn't stand living under his mother's shadow anymore. And then the big moment arrived. Mrs. Legia arrived home and found the living room full of boxes. She could barely hide her shock. Her eyes widened, she stood at the door and blurted out. "What's this?" I crossed my arms, took a deep breath and calmly replied. "Hey, didn't you ask us to leave?" "Well, we're leaving." The color drained from her face, as if someone had pulled the plug. She was in despair right away. Because right then and there, it hit her. She thought we were going to take a long time. That we were going to drag things out. That I was going to beg. But no. I'm a woman of action. And when I decide to leave your life, my dear, it's behind closed doors and there's no turning back. What she didn't expect was the speed. To see the movers coming in and out with boxes, us deciding everything at a frantic pace, while she ran around the house, not knowing whether to scream, cry or pretend that everything was fine. "Luna, you don't have to do this so fast," she said, trying to keep her composure. "But Mrs. Legia," I replied with the best of my smiles, "weren't you the one who asked us to leave?" Victor, who had been serious until then, let out a little laugh. I saw the relief in his eyes. The urge to shout finally. "But Mrs. Legia?" She started pacing the living room like a dog that had lost its bone. Every box that left the house seemed to take away a little of her peace of mind. The woman started to sweat, her hand shaking, and then she said, "Are you sure you need to leave so fast? We're making it easy, mother-in-law. This what George and his wife will have their own space, right?" I said, winking at Victor. And that was when the most anticipated moment came. The question that had been stuck in her throat since the first we're leaving. "But, what about the rent?" Bingo. The real reason for the panic. Because deep down, she knew that what she was losing wasn't our company. It was because we've paid every bill in that house since we've moved to there. Victor crossed his arms and answered in the most mocking tone in the world. "Hey, Mom. I thought you wanted more space, not more money." She was shocked. And then she freaked out. She started yelling at me saying that it was my fault, that I was doing everything to irritate her, but then Victor said to her, "Mom, you're wrong, you know you're wrong. You can keep the house and stop fighting with Luna." I said to her, "Am I to blame? You practically kicked us out of the house that belongs to Victor, I'm just speeding things up." And then in a fit of rage, she came and slapped me in the face. The room went silent, the sound of that slap echoed. Victor said, "Mom, are you crazy? You're crazy." She realized she had crossed the line. I said to her, "If you wanted us to leave, congratulations. You did it." I finished the last box in the kitchen, still in shock at what she had done, took a deep breath and stood up. With each step I took around the house, it felt like I was freeing myself from a weight I had been carrying for years. A weight that, until that moment, I had no idea how much it was suffocating me. When the move was finished, I thanked the guys, got into the truck with Victor and we left. Without looking back. Not for a second. It was only when the door to our new apartment closed behind us that I finally felt peace. It was small, simple, still smelling of fresh paint, but it was ours. No shouting in the hallway, no judgments at breakfast, no one rummaging through our drawers or controlling the air conditioning temperature. It was freedom in the form of 2 rooms and a mattress on the floor. That night, Victor looked at me like he hadn't looked at me in a long time. With admiration, with affection, with that glow that made me fall in love with him years ago. We laughed about the craziness of the last few days, ate pizza sitting on the floor and slept cuddled together, even though our backs were complaining about the lack of a bed. I thought, that's it. It's over. New phase. New cycle. Little did I know that the universe still had a few more tricks up its sleeve. And one of them was about to turn the next day. We woke up with the sun streaming through the window and a tranquility that seemed fake. We had breakfast listening to music, laughing at our mess and talking about plans for our new home. And then Victor's phone rang. He looked at the screen, snorted, and answered with that voice of someone who already knows something's coming. "Hi, Mom." On the other end, there was a cry. A sob, actually. You know that desperate cry of a child who has lost a toy? That's right. That was it. Mrs. Leggio was in tears. "Victor, for the love of God, you have to help me." At that moment, I stopped with the coffee mug in the air and stared at him with an arched eyebrow. He looked at me and put the phone on speaker. "What's up now, Mom?" he asked, already out of patience. The answer came like a punch. George and his wife gave up on coming to live here. I swear I choked on my coffee. I paused. I blinked 3 times. Was that really what I had heard? Yes. The woman who made our lives hell, who made us run away from the house as if we were unwelcome guests, was now there, alone. With a huge castle in her hands and no heir wanting the throne. Victor was speechless. But me? I was holding back my laughter with all my strength. Because it was the height of irony. She had bet all her chips on her favorite son and now her account was in the red. "I can't pay the bills alone, son," she whined. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. That part of me that had always been nice, that always thought poor thing, tried to speak louder. But then I remembered the slap. The scandal. The embarrassment. "Mom," Victor replied, with an almost dangerous calm, "you do what any adult does, you work and pay your bills." The silence on the other end was worthy of a soap opera. Mrs. Legia, work? The woman who has never worked a day job in her life, now having to deal with the consequences of her own decisions? Was that really what was happening? She even tried to argue. She tried to say that it was all a misunderstanding, that she got carried away, that she didn't want it to end like this. But then I was the one who picked up the phone and decided to end the conversation once and for all. "Mrs. Legia, look, if it were a few days ago, maybe we would even think about helping. But now, honestly, we are so happy in our little corner, without confusion, without shouting, that going back to that house would be a step backwards." It was the final blow. She tried to say something else, but Victor had already hung up. At that moment, I leaned against the wall of our new home and let out a laugh. It wasn't mockery. It was relief. It was the certainty that, for the first time in a long time, we had chosen each other. And Mrs. Legia? She got exactly what she was looking for. In the days that followed, peace became routine. And what a good routine. I never imagined that the simple fact of waking up without hearing my mother-in-law's voice would be a reason to celebrate. It was as if I was detoxing, you know? Each day away from that house made me feel lighter. Victor, on the other hand, seemed to finally be able to breathe. Without his mother's advice, he started making decisions on his own. He went back to school, started thinking about plans for the future, things that before he barely had time to consider. And, look, I was there by his side, holding his hand, but this time as a partner, not as someone who had to defend himself inside his own house. The change was good for us. And it was bad for Mrs. Legia. Every 2 or 3 days, she would call. Sometimes to cry. Sometimes to accuse. Sometimes to apologize, but always in that crooked way of hers, without ever truly admitting what she did. "It was the heat of the moment," she would say. "I just got worked up," she would repeat. Did she get worked up? The woman slapped me in the face in front of a room full of people. But you know what? I wasn't going to give her that power anymore. I had learned that the best revenge wasn't to yell, fight back or make a fuss. It was to move on and live well. Show that, without her, life went on, and it went on better. One day, she called with that rehearsed tone. "You don't have to leave so quickly. The house is big, it's always been yours too." Victor just crossed his arms and stared at his cell phone. I took the phone from his hand and answered with the most acidic sweetness I could muster. "Hey, mother-in-law, but you were so clear. You said you needed space, that George was going to move with his wife. He's not going anymore, is he?" On the other end, silence. I could almost hear her swallowing her dry pride. The truth is that Mrs. Legia didn't miss us. She missed our money. The bills paid. The shared electricity bill. The grocery shopping that, mysteriously, she never reimbursed. She didn't lose her son and daughter-in-law. She lost the private bank that supported her standard of living. And look, as cruel as it may seem, it was liberating to realize. I spent so long thinking that the problem was with me. That I was the troublemaker. The rebel. The ungrateful one. But deep down, I was just trying to protect my sanity. After that last phone call, her calls decreased. Maybe out of pride. Maybe out of shame. Maybe because she finally realized that her life had fallen apart because of her own fault. And us? Oh, we flourished. I went back to doing the things I liked. I got back to my projects. I even started writing about everything I had experienced. Vitor encouraged me, read everything, gave me ideas. It was as if we had found each other again, and not just as a couple, but as individuals. You know when you clean a room in your house and, suddenly, it seems bigger, brighter, more pleasant to be in? That's what happened to us. Mrs. Legia's absence left room for light to enter. And with the light came clarity, love, growth. I won't lie, sometimes I thought about her. Not with longing, but with a certain curiosity. How was she dealing with the bills? Had she found a way to get by? Or was she still waiting for us to show up with our suitcases in hand, ready to save the day? But then I remembered the last time I was in that house. The slap. The scandal. Her face distorted by anger. And I took another deep breath. Because there are things we need to leave behind in order to move forward. And Mrs. Legia, with all her manipulation, her inflated ego and her inability to love without control, was one of those things. Life went on. And the best part? It was just the beginning. The feeling of freedom lasted exactly 24 hours. A whole day of peace, silence and quiet. And on the second day, when we were still getting used to the new apartment, Victor's cell phone rang. He answered it automatically, with that sigh of someone who knows a bomb is coming. Mom? On the other end, there was crying. A desperation that I recognized right away. It wasn't pain. It was terror. Vitor, for the love of God, you have to help me. I put the broom down, because yes, we were still finishing cleaning the apartment, and I got closer, just watching. He put it on speakerphone. What happened now, Mom? And she kept saying the same thing. Son, George and his wife decided not to come and live here. Please come back, I need help. Pause. The same woman who kicked us out of the house, caused a scene, screamed in the middle of the living room, slapped me in the face, all to make room for her favorite son and the daughter-in-law she dreamed of. And now? Now she was alone, and would continue to be alone. And me. I can't pay the bills alone, she whined, as if she were the biggest victim in the story. Victor rolled his eyes so hard it seemed like he was going to see his own brain. He answered curtly, without raising his voice, but with a firmness I had never seen in him. Hey, Mom, we've already talked about this. You'll be able to get by, you'll find a job to pay the bills. Son, please come back. It'll be better for everyone. Come back? After everything she did? For her it would be great, but for us it would be going back to the past that hurt us so much, even more so after she slapped me in the face in front of everyone. Mrs. Legia never worked. I've never even seen her. She always had someone to pay for everything. First Victor's father, then Victor himself, then the two of us. When she saw that George and his wife weren't going to pay anything, that they weren't going to share the expenses, that they weren't going to carry out that perfect family plan that she had created in her own head, that's when she really got desperate. You can't go back, at least for a while, until I get my act together. She begged. I wasn't even going to say anything. I was there, quiet, just listening. But I couldn't. I needed to let it out. Mrs. Legia, if it had been a few days ago, who knows? But now we have our own little corner. And honestly, we're much better off without the chaos. Silence again. And this time, the call ended with a sharp click. Vitor hung up on her without mercy. And that was it. The woman who thought she was in control of everything, who spoke loudly, who pointed fingers, who felt like she owned our lives, ended up alone in a huge, empty house, with a pile of bills to pay. Poetic justice, right? I won't deny it, I felt a little bit of satisfaction. Not because of her pain, but because it was as if the universe had found a way to show her what we had been trying to say for so long. And you know what's even crazier? Victor and I became stronger after all of this. What seemed like the end turned into the beginning of the best phase of our lives. We learned to protect ourselves. To set limits. To not accept crumbs of respect just because someone is related by blood. And you know what? Leaving that house was an act of love. Love for me, for him, for our mental health. What Mrs. Legia didn't understand is that control is not love. That yelling is not caring. That hitting is not proof of affection. But I learned. And so did Victor. And from that moment on, we promised, never again will anyone treat us as if they were doing us a favor to respect us. After that last phone call, peace settled into our lives once and for all. Victor and I, without my mother-in-law around, without yelling, without emotional manipulation, began to truly breathe. For the first time in a long time, I woke up without that tension in my chest. Without walking on eggshells. Our apartment was small, but it was ours. The couch was still borrowed from my cousin, the refrigerator made a strange noise at night, and the TV only got 3 channels, but none of that mattered. It was freedom. Vitor even felt lighter. That man who used to live in a constant state of alert, now laughed for no reason. And I was rediscovering who I was without Mrs. Legia's predictions echoing in my ears. Sometimes, I remembered the slap. Not because of the physical pain, that soon passed. But because of the scene. Because of the humiliation. The entire room was silent, my cheeks were burning, and the whole world seemed to stop for a few seconds. The kind of scene you never forget. But you know what I'll never forget? It was the feeling of turning to her after the slap and smiling. A mocking smile, full of irony, of someone who understood that, at that moment, she had lost. She didn't break me. Quite the opposite. She freed me. Because, right then, I knew that it didn't matter what she said or did. I wasn't going to keep quiet anymore, or shrink away, or pretend that everything was okay. And, look, when you understand your own value, when you stop asking for permission to exist, things change. I remember that a few days after the move, Victor and I were sitting on the living room floor, eating pizza on top of a cardboard box. He looked at me with that silly smile and said, "Do you know that I've never seen you so happy?" And it was true. I was happy. Even without luxury, even with bills, even starting from scratch. Because a life without drama is a luxury that is priceless. And you know what's even better? Knowing that he and I went through hell together and came out stronger. It wasn't easy, no. It hurts to leave a place where you invested time, money, emotional energy. It hurts to realize that you were used. That you put up with things you shouldn't have for a long time. But liberating is not enough to describe what it was like to take that step. And while Mrs. Legia struggled there, trying to figure out how she was going to pay the electricity, water, condominium bills, and how she was going to deal with her own loneliness, we carried on. Victor, in fact, started to set limits once and for all. No more calling at odd hours, no rushing to solve problems that weren't ours. He realized that, even though she was his mother, she didn't have the right to control our lives. And me? I started to take better care of myself. I looked at myself in the mirror with a different attitude. I was no longer that cornered woman who apologized for even existing. I was a different person. And it all started the day I got slapped in the face. It seems crazy to say this, but that moment was the turning point. Because sometimes, you have to be pushed to the bottom in order to gain momentum and rise. And that's exactly what happened. But what I didn't know was that, even after everything, Mrs. Leggio would still try to play one more card. And, as always, she would lose. A few weeks went by. We had already organized the house, hung pictures on the wall, bought a real table, goodbye, cardboard box, and even started to set up a little vegetable garden on the balcony. I was at the height of my peace, watering the plants, when Victor's phone rang. He looked at the screen and sighed. "It's my mother." I just raised my eyebrow. I didn't even need to say anything. He answered on speakerphone. "Hi, Mom." "Vitor, can you come here?" "Why?" "Just come, please." Her voice was strange. Not arrogant, not sly. Just defeated. Vitor hung up and looked at me with that "here we go" look. But I went with him. And I'm glad I did. When I got there, the house that had seemed like a castle before, full of rules, shouting, and control, now seemed like a mausoleum. Silent, dark, cold. Mrs. Leggio was sitting on the couch, with deep circles under her eyes, disheveled hair, and an expression I had never seen on her, fragility. "I know you don't want to see me," she began. "You're right," I said. "But I need to talk." She took a deep breath. Her voice was shaky. Her eyes were red. And then she said, "George won't come anymore." He and his wife decided to live near her family. He said he didn't want to get into trouble. Silence. I didn't even feel sorry for him. I just watched. And I can't keep up with all this alone. I messed up. I did everything wrong. I thought I was protecting my space, my authority, but I only pushed away those who really cared about me. That was almost an apology. Crooked, proud, but it was. I wanted to ask for you to come back. Even if it's just until I can get myself together. Vitor crossed his arms. I stood firm, looking her straight in the eyes. "Mrs. Leggio, you kicked us out. You humiliated me. You assaulted me. You thought you were winning a prize, but you lost everything. Now you want us to come back as if nothing had happened?" She didn't answer. She just lowered her head. Vitor went straight to the point. "Mom, we're not going back. We finally have peace. And we're not going to give that up again." She cried. And I swear that, for a second, I even felt compassion. But it passed quickly. Because I remembered everything I had swallowed in silence. Every sleepless night. Every abuse disguised as concern. So we turned our backs and left. And there, on that sidewalk, I felt the weight of an era ending. The era in which I was submissive. In which I swallowed frogs. When I pretended everything was fine just so I wouldn't cause trouble. That era is long gone. Today, I know exactly what I deserve. And what I no longer accept. Victor held my hand. We walked down the street laughing nervously, but certain of our decision. We never went back. She never held us in her hands again. And life? Oh, life went on. Lighter. More beautiful. Because sometimes, the fairest punishment is to see your own arrogance turn against you. And honestly, if I had to go through it all over again to get to where I am today, I would. Without thinking twice.